I'm coming. Ah, hello. Come in, come in. I am guitarist, keeper of the sacred library. You must be here about the tiny bookcase. Then follow me. I've sent 2 adventurers out to find stories. So join me here by my crystal ball, and let us see where they are now.
But of course the Golden Eagle was then lost for good.
And that was the last battle.
Yeah.
Right, I've finished polishing my ball. Am I coming through clearly?
Yeah?
Silly Shazam. Nothing bloody magical about that spray. Is that ale I smell? Where might you be this week?
The chocolate starfish, sir.
What a lovely voice. Who are you?
I'm Elliott D'Alvarez from Dead Man's Whiskey.
A ridiculously talented man.
Indeed. Listen, after all of this housework, I'm rather in need of my stories, boys.
Telltale signs of wizardly addiction.
No!
Okay. What is it this week, Nico?
Stuffed.
Gotcha. Here it is. Stuffed. I don't give a fuck what it is you want. I want that gear on the loading dock tonight, you hear me? Ronnie Dunn ended the call with a savage stab of his thumb and placed the slim black phone in his inner jacket pocket. The suit was well tailored, but he couldn't abide stitching with no pockets. It spoke of a man who didn't have his hands firmly wrapped around his own business. Ronnie had always been a hands-on, from the early days of twatting people for money in the late 90s, to the noughties where he built his business up one bloody brick at a time. And even nowadays, he liked to keep his fingers on the other man's pulse. Ronnie took a relaxing breath. His old ball and chain had forced him to try meditation before she went. He'd told her it was perfect, right on the money. But in truth, it was only the breathing that he'd actually liked. Even then, after a few big ones, he started to think about the other people that weren't wasting their time. Those fellows were instead sharpening their knives and measuring his mansion for curtains. He opened his eyes as the anger and fear that ruled him switched his lizard brain back on. The grounds of his house stretched out in front of him. Lush grass cut into unusual patterns by the new gardener, big trees catching the wind, and robust rockeries that his wife had put in greeted his gaze. He was still paying the legal fees for what had happened when the previous gardener tried to change the plants in those rockeries. With a sharp moment of fear, he realised the time, and rushed back inside through the large house to the front door. She was already getting in the car, but he got his head out of the door in time and waved. "Bye, sweetheart. Have a good one." His little girl waved back at him, and the powerful car started up its engine for the school run. It was all black with tinted windows. He tested them himself with the .45 he kept on his person at all times. The bullet hadn't even left a scratch. Nothing was too good for his Maxine. Ronnie shut the massive front door and strolled back through the house. Each room was filled with opulent but practical furniture. He'd bought the place for his wife, or so he told himself. She had loved to entertain. And now it was just the two of them, plus the help, rattling around in it. He liked the safety of Maxime being out of London, but he didn't like the feeling of being too far from his own businesses. He felt that it invited competitors, and everyone knew what Ronnie Dunn would do to jumped-up lackwits who tried to take him on. Ronnie opened the door to the basement. It required a 6-digit pin before the bolt would unlock. He couldn't have Maxine getting down there. A wide metal staircase curved downward into a well-lit hallway. The walls were painted white and the floor was steel. Periodically along the walls were alcoves with marble plinths built up to shin height. Adorning them were what appeared to be statues of people, 13 in total. As a set, they were ethnically diverse and exceptionally lifelike. There was no consistency to their clothing, which ranged from artfully torn jeans to expensive suits. Their poses, however, were uniform. Each held their hands out, palm up, in supplication. As he walked down the lined corridor, Ronnie stopped to look at each of them. Their eyes followed him until he reached the door at the far end. Beyond that corridor was a series of doors. One led to a workshop, another to a small suite of personal rooms. and the last to the cells. The doors to the doctor's private rooms were closed. Ronnie knew that the man liked to sleep through the day. He opened the door to the cells and stepped inside. The whole subterranean complex smelt like an operating theatre, and the cells were no different. Only one of the steel cages was occupied. Inside, a naked man huddled on the floor and shivered. He was muscular and well-proportioned, whereas Ronnie had always been a bit lumpy. "You cold, my boy?" "What do you think? My boy's at your door yet?" The man had a pretty face that creased in a defiant smile. Ronnie could see the fear in his eyes, though. "If they could have come for you, my boy, they would have done. Your chums are dead or scarpered. Fucking rude of you to sell that shit near my docks, don't you think?" "It's just a bit of pot, Ronnie. My boy didn't even know where he was." "Yeah, well, you gonna do me like that, just for that?" "Tell you the truth, fella, I'm a little superstitious. The doctor is too. Says there's some bad witchery coming my way if I don't do another one." Ronnie could see the white all around the man's eyes now. "Are you fucking kidding me? You're doing me for that, because you're afraid of a number?" "Well, that and, you're a bad little twat, Jimmy." It was then that the man started screaming, throwing himself at the bars between them, and reaching through them for Ronnie. "Disgusting. You can't behave like a man, I shan't speak to you as one." As Ronnie closed the door to the cells behind him, Jimmy's noises were cut off by the soundproofing. He took a notebook out of one of his other pockets and scrawled a note for the doctor. 14th needed ASAP. Do it tonight. Ronnie took his note with him into the workshop. Inside were the taxidermist's tools. Bright and shining implements with a central area for wire rigging and articulation. The steel cables hung limply at the moment, but Ronnie had seen them work wonders. He placed his note on the gutting station's steel slab. There were, of course, things in the room that were beyond Ronnie's full comprehension. A set of dark mirrors bookended the other workstation in the room, and beyond it was a wall of reagents, which he had seen the doctor mix into a powder. That powder, once inhaled by Ronnie's chosen enemies, would grant them partial brain function beyond death. They could even still see through their eyes. That had been a personal request. Ronnie liked to know that they saw him alive and thriving. As he walked back through the hallway, he stopped again to study his collection. For each of them, he remembered the bitter struggles, the near misses, and the final victorious swoops as he took them out. And now, Ronnie was King of London, no doubt about that. It was just a shame there hadn't been one more real enemy. That lad Jimmy hadn't been a real threat. Ronnie knew he'd been looking for any excuse, but once you start using blood as the mortar for your empire's bricks, you simply can't stop, or the whole thing crumbles. Ronnie Dunn spent the rest of the day in his office. He was at the heart of his network, and everyone wanted a piece of his time. Once the sun went down, he started pouring drams of fine whiskey. The measures became heavier and heavier, until his lids were ready to close. He had always been able to hold his drink, but as he got older, he found himself walking increasingly unsteadily after a day of work. He didn't like Maxine to see him like that, and so he put a heavy hand on her door as he passed it before stumbling into his own room and falling into bed. Ronnie awoke the next morning, having slept through his alarms. He was confused for a moment, a feeling which deepened as he checked the clock on his nightstand. Ronnie never slept in, not even after a few strong drinks. His concern continued to grow as he got out of bed and dressed quickly in a loose white shirt, dark belted trousers, and slip-on boots. Someone should have come to get him by now. He pulled the .45 out from under his pillow and checked the clip before flipping the safety off. He swung the gun out in front of him as he stepped out from his palatial bedroom into the corridor and listened intently. The house was silent. He couldn't hear any of the housekeepers, or even the new gardener. His concern turned to white-hot unease as he saw Maxine's door was open. He stepped inside her room. The walls were purple, and the shelves held plush dolls, books, and fairy lights. The furniture was a deep cream to match the carpet, and the brocade curtains let in a pleasant morning light. Maxine was still in bed. Ronnie let out a breath he had been holding, and approached her. "Wake up, darling, it's all okay." Maxine did not stir. As he got closer, he saw that she was looking at him, and he recognized the glance. Desperately wanting to deny his reality, he pulled back the covers. Beneath it she wore the pyjamas that he'd bought for her for Christmas, and she held out her hands, palm up, in supplication. Ronnie dropped his gun Deep, sobbing screams shuttled up his throat and came out of his mouth. He scooped her up and held her with all of his strength, trying to bring true life back to her with his touch. Her arms snapped off at the elbow as he did so. Wool stuffing tumbled out of her and onto the bed. Maxine's eyes focused intensely on his face, but he knew she could no longer cry or speak. He felt the cold muzzle of the 45 press into the back of his head. Even over the noise of his own heartbeat thumping in his ears, he heard Jimmy's deep voice. Get stuffed, Ronnie.
Holy shit, man. That was...
It was not really
like
what I expected at the start. I clocked what it was going to be like a minute in or so. And I was just... Yeah, it was dark. I liked it. Yeah, I've gone quite dark. And I think it was just like... It was... Yeah, it was such a good build-up. I don't know if you guys have just done it for me, but I really appreciate that you've like toned the intellectual language down a bit, just in case I wrote mine like a 5-year-old. Because I've listened to some of the others and I'm like, I don't know what some of those words mean. But this one, pretty much understood all of it.
I think it all depends what mood we're in, doesn't it? Sometimes it calls for you being verbose and sometimes you don't need to.
No, I was trying to do like the main thing that I was doing there was I knew I was going to write a character who spoke a bit like Ben Kingsley in Sexy
You're the
Beast.
problem. You're the fucking problem.
Yeah, that one, yeah. So it was actually a little bit more dialogue heavy than my previous stories have been. I think
it was nice to hear it though. It was. I'd say the one thing about it was like I felt the twist coming. He's not going to be the one that gets stuffed, and I really thought it was going to be Ronnie. So then I was even more shit when it turned out to have been poor young Maxine.
Little Maxine. I'm probably going to really offend everyone that's that's ever called their daughters Maxine, but it's quite an ugly name.
Oh, I've got an auntie Maxine, man.
There you go.
That's just shots fired.
I've just fired that.
I feel like that has no relevance to the story. That is just a personal attack.
It's going through my Facebook friends. Who's he related to?
Just a whole list of Maxines.
So it was literally the first name that leapt into my mind. I was like, what would a gangster with no class and no taste call his daughter?
Good Christ.
Oh.
Listen, we're not going to discuss my family past in this podcast or my lack of taste.
It's just a good irony that gangsters are ones digging graves normally, but you've got pretty deep with this.
No, I really... Elliott's saying about the language being simpler. It felt like, much like when I wrote the dog story, it felt like because it was in his mind, there were little flashes of real, like a highfalutin language, to use a phrase you've used before, but in a way that it was almost like an affectation for the character. It felt like to me. Yeah.
I think I like to imagine that his wife was a very positive influence on him.
The stuff about the yoga and only really liking the breathing, that was actually a really nice character touch.
Yeah, well, that's actually from me. I drive for that. Like, I really enjoy controlling my breathing, but like spending half an hour like making weird shapes just deeply annoys me.
You don't do the warrior pose just to get ready for your day.
I am a warrior, Nick. I don't need to get into a pose.
You do the hacker in the morning, though. I know when I stay over, I hear you in front of the mirror. Come on in!
That's how I'll wake up guests. Just wait in front of the door until they come out. Oh, no, well, I'm glad you liked it. It was a bit more sort of like horror than what I normally go for as well. Bit of body horror.
Oh, it definitely was. It was like House of Wax. Don't know if you've ever seen that, but
yeah.
I think I have seen that.
Yeah, same premise. It's got one of the scenes. I don't know why. It just used to freak me out as a teenager, and it's like it's nothing to do with any of the process of essentially making people into wax statues. Spoilers. But it's the scene where the girl's just outside of the house, and he comes up through the grate and clips the back of her ankle with
that's rank, that bit, innit?
Yeah, and I was like, I hadn't really seen anything sort of. It's something like, it just makes me cringe.
He hadn't seen that before. Now, weekly occurrences.
Yeah. That's what happens when you live in London, my friend.
Oh, right. Well, okay. So, Nick, have you got a story for us?
I do.
All right, let me
Just go in another direction.
I'm sort of hoping there's one week where one of you just goes, no.
I'm afraid not.
Just couldn't be bothered this week, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I just didn't have any ideas.
Yeah, just start doing excerpts from random books.
Just sit down and listen to Nick read Lord of the Rings out.
Yeah, but just like the most pointless scenes. Hopefully not chronologically either. Just like pick a random page, just flick through and start on like page 12 and then end up on like 41 and then 200.
Or better yet, whenever it comes across one of the many songs that are in Lord of the Rings, instead of singing it out, he just screams it tonelessly.
No, I'm going to sing all of the prose and then read all of the songs. That's what I'm going to do. Someone rapped gently against the office door. The silence that followed was broken by a resigned sigh. Yes, yeah, come in. Satan nudged some of the paperwork that had mounted on his desk, a last frivolous attempt to convince himself that it was organised. These were stacks that could be steadily worked through. Eighth circle, he chuckled to himself. Don't be a liar. The door was cracked open gently, and one of the underbeings peeked the top of its head around it. The sunken pits that stood for its eyes glowed softly, like coals fading on a winter's night. They met the dark prince of all that is unholy with a warm malice. Sorry to interrupt, sir. I know you're busy. The demon tried not to embarrass its boss, but it was in its nature to be cruel. Almost instinctively, it gesticulated at the mounds of paperwork and raised an eyebrow. But we have another one. Satan ran a gnarled hand across his jaw. The claws left soothing scorch marks on his crimson flesh. This was getting beyond a joke now. It couldn't go on much longer. Fine, send it in. Satan did his best to look devilish. Reaching for the large bronze pitchfork that leant against the back wall behind him, he sucked in his gut a little and tried to think old-school hell thoughts. Before the bureaucracy, when it had been all brimstone and poking people with hot poles and the occasional flaying, the job had been an absolute delight. But with the expansion of the world's population, heaven had made a decision that had subsequently moved the goalposts. Frankly, Satan thought, they were extremely childish about the whole thing. Back in the day, you could smash someone to death with rocks, or sail across an ocean and hit someone vaguely foreign with a pointy bit of metal, and they'd already be warming up a chair for you in heaven. Now, well, anyone they thought they could fob off on hell, they did. Few too many pints on a weekend? Hell. Tried to wiggle a couple of £100 by putting up fences of a weekend? Hell. Not washing the jam jars out before they went in the recycling? Double hell with a side of hell. Satan didn't mind their quest to find good people, but this was just taking the piss. He turned to face the door as a rather perturbed-looking man was hurried through by a demon. The humour of seeing a human in whatever they wore as they died had never quite worn off for Satan, in fact getting better and better as the years went on. The swathes of people draped in what appeared to be bedding had given way to plate armour, shoulder-padded blazers, and, most pleasingly, something the humans called a speedo. This particular little man was wearing absolutely nothing apart from a pair of greying socks, from which one of his toes protruded like a mole surfacing for air. He was sweating more than the usual, good grief it's hot in here, sort of sweat that hell gave people, and looked up at the devil himself with a weak smile, moving one of his hands to cup his genitals, while the other was offered for a handshake. Formal. Disgusting. Satan looked the man up and down before taking the sheaf of paper that the demon was proffering and glancing over it. Dave. You okay with me calling you Dave? The little man shifted uncomfortably. I actually do prefer David. Good. Now, Dave. Satan gestured towards a chair with one of his enormous hands. David seemed concerned by the burning coals directly around the arse area of it. Please, I insist. The hiss and groan that came from David sitting down was delightful, a playful noise with definite notes of bloody hell, it can't get any worse than this, can it? It Conversely, it could and often did get a lot bloody worse than that, when budget allowed for it, and probably more often if God would have given a touch of leeway in terms of headcount.
Dave, first off, I'd like to formally welcome you to the afterlife. How did you get on up there?
Dave shifted slightly in his chair. One of his exposed testicles dangled dangerously close to the coals, and a pube went up like a wick. He hardly seemed to notice. All right, I suppose. I made a decent enough wage, a nice house, lovely wife, and all that.
Yeah, I see. Says here you popped your clogs. How should I put this?
Fucking, sir, the demon offered from its place by the door. Satan repressed a groan.
Yes,
the devil said. Yes, the David agreed. The greying socks had somehow, in that moment, become a lot bloody worse. Satan laid the sheet of paper on top of the huge pile in front of him and dropped into his baby-skin chair, fixing the newly dead man with a stare.
I'm going to be frank with you, Dave. We are pretty stuffed down here. Between the rapists, murderers, and Catholics, there is barely room to swing a heretic. So I'm going to see if we can't get you moved upstairs.
David's face went through 30 or 40 emotions, some of which he'd never had before, in roughly 10 seconds. What, to heaven, you mean? Okay, so he wasn't very clever, so we're not getting him up there on the used his mind for the humanity's cause thing. A lot of terrible bastards had slipped through on that one.
Yes, Dave, let me ask, what did you do up there?
I was a banker. Well, sort of. I managed bankers. Lovely bonuses in it. A line was scored through the pad in front of Lucifer, who muttered bollocks under his throat.
Right. Okay, Dave. Do any charity work, volunteering, that kind of thing?
Oh, no. Time is money, sir. God, this prick was unbearable. Maybe there was something else.
Your wife. You must have treated her well, man of your, shape. Pounding a woman hard enough to die must have been quite the lady.
Oh, a terrific woman, yes. Not the wife, though. Lovely young thing, barely 18 and supple as a bamboo rod. Satan met the demon by the door's eyes. This really wasn't looking good for Dave or him. He basically hadn't any room, but he did have an idea.
You see all this, paperwork here?
He gestured at the mounds of unfinished forms and invoices on his desk. His own personal hell.
You reckon you could work through this?
That? My bread and butter. I can have that done in a week. The devil scratched a tick into the box marked, willing to help even the most wretched of souls. Flicking the pencil across the desk at David, he stood quickly.
Best get to it then, sunshine. I'll text ahead. Nice white robe to cover that ass of yours.
Chuckling to himself, he left the office and the human behind. The demon would whip him, and the paperwork would all be done. Maybe it was Satan who was the one going to heaven after all.
Oof. I really like your stories about bureaucracy, man.
It was a glorified admin story. I quite like it. You said you had a busy day at work. I think it's really reflected in this story.
I clearly have a disdain for it, though, don't I?
The bit about the desk that he was like just shuffling papers around on was, we were saying earlier about the shots fired, about the Maxine thing. Like that was, that's me.
I'm not saying you are the devil, but you do have a baby skin chair.
Well, you got to put your hot coals somewhere. Also, the not washing your jam jars out correctly before putting them in the recycling. I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna burn.
It did genuinely come from that thing of it does seem like when you talk to religious people, and I can say for both Ben and myself, I've actually never really asked you about it, Elliot, but we're not religious.
No, I'm not religious, personally.
And it does seem like the goalposts have shifted a bit, and it is really difficult to get into heaven these days.
I think it varies, though. It's not really a one-sided sort of set of affairs anymore. It shifts depending on how many numbers they need, because some stuff that was prohibited a good 20 years ago is now perfectly acceptable. So it goes both ways.
Well, that's how you operate big business, isn't it? You know.
Precisely. At least Satan's fighting back.
Well, not at the minute. It's how much he's got on, mate.
A week's worth of paperwork.
Only to a bureaucrat at that level.
The true bureaucrat. The joke about the clothes as well, I really liked. What people died in. That was deep chuckles, man. Loved it. Just full of nice ideas. Like you do occasionally, like all the like South Park and other shows like that. They've all got like a devil type thing, haven't they? So you sort of occasionally do see it in pop culture. Funny representations of what it's like in hell. But I really liked this one. It felt really fresh.
I did. I mean, the line didn't come until the end, but I really liked the idea of even Satan's having a bad time in hell. Like, it's shit for everyone. I mean, wouldn't that be? Or would it be? There's a great sketch. I think it's College Humor, and it's these guys in hell. It's a man and a woman. They're both in hell, and they every time they want something, they've just got a slightly worse thing that's basically the same. So, like, I could really go for a Coke. Is a Pepsi okay? And then it obviously goes from there, and it's. I'll post it out. I'll tweet it.
Oh, very nice.
May I ask us a bit of a side question, and then maybe you didn't go this in depth. Who's this paperwork for?
I had assumed God.
Oh, so Satan reports to God. Okay, that makes sense.
I mean, according to some versions of the story, Satan is in fact an angel.
That is very true.
Lucifer. I suppose it's just for, tax purposes or
He's
whatever.
got to fill out his tax return. Also, I think I'm going to be carrying around supple as a bamboo rod for a long time.
Yeah, I like that was probably the most descriptive bit of the story. So like, I know this bit.
I can tell this story.
Yeah, it did paint a weird, vivid picture that I can't unsee.
I mean, I always knew, like when I started writing this story, I always knew. When I wrote the story, I knew I wanted him to have died cheating on his wife. But having him have his socks on still, and then be like, when you've had white socks for more than a year, and if you've worn them a lot, they just go that kind of weird, not even like fully grey, they're just wrong coloured.
Yeah.
That, rank.
Yes.
Right, enough about my dead man in his socks. I think we should call upon Elliott, who I'm going to call out here, who told me today that this is the first thing he's written since secondary school.
Oh, it definitely is. Like, that's not even an exaggeration. I was never particularly that good at English. I think I didn't find it the most thrilling subject, but partly because of the way it was taught. I do quite like words.
But you've written some song lyrics though, surely with.
Not with this band so much. I mean, in previous bands, yeah, I've written song lyrics. They're more, I guess, like poetry to an extent, and more like poetry written by an emo, but like a really self-loathing emo. Like, so yeah, they don't really get used that much because it's apparently not the sort of things people want to hear.
Especially from someone, and I'm going to be frank here, quite as good looking as you. No one wants to hear you feeling sorry for yourself.
Well, I mean, it's a weird thing to say on a podcast because no one can disprove that.
Well, we're gonna have to take a picture of Elliott's face.
It's going to be the artwork.
Just, I'm not drawing a pub sign this time. It's just going to be Elliott's.
My
face.
chocolate starfish, sir.
Different pin-up angles,
Go on, Elliott. Let's have your story.
I'm so nervous about reading. As I lay there on the floor, wondering how this wicked twist of fate had wormed its way into my somewhat straightforward life, I could only help but think of those I would be leaving behind. I've not many years on me, but I've definitely lived more than one life, and they're two sides of a very different coin. In fact, I guess you could say it was a simple coin that started this debacle, but that's for a different time. In my first life, things were as good as anything with a single ounce of consciousness could wish for from their short time on this planet. I had a large extended family, and my days were filled with frivolous journeys which I wished would never end. But as they say, all good things must come to an end. The dark day, as it was aptly named, happened in one of the hottest Julys on record, a little over a year ago now. I always chuckled that a day filled with so much brightness could end so bleak. I remember the tears, the screams, the accusations, and finally the banishment of everyone I had come to love. Mandy was gone. She was just gone, which meant we had to say goodbye to the world we knew. Everything happened in a bit of a haze. I remember being awoken by my daughter. The room was so dark I could barely make out the fear in her eyes, but I could hear the trembling in her voice. My daughter, whom we call Peep, has always been taller than me, ever since we first met, so I always felt a little unsteady when she needed me to lean on. My wife Bessie and I could never have kids of our own, something about us being biologically incompatible, and we had written off the idea completely until we met Peep. She had been abandoned, which is far more common than you would think where we come from, so we gave her shelter and a new life. If I had known what life would eventually become, I would have left her where we found her. The cold floor of an alley at least has light a few hours a day. "Where are we?" I finally managed to say after an alarmingly long silence. I think we're in a basement. Some of the others went to look for a way out, but it's hard enough to see your hand in front of your face, let alone an exit," Peep explained. "Have you seen your mother?" It dawned on me that in hindsight, that probably should have been my first question. I can't blame the darkness for that oversight. "Yes, she's just trying to calm down Lotzie. She's in one of her moods again," she said, relieved to know that I was at least remotely aware of the situation. I should have known if anyone could make a bad situation worse, it was Lotzie. I always believed Lotzie was good at heart. She had a particularly rough past which she could never fully let go, but she would occasionally attempt to integrate with the group, and who are we to say no to someone in need? Over the next few weeks, however, I rapidly lost faith that she was even capable of a goodwill gesture towards herself, let alone others. It started with the occasional disagreement about whether we should keep searching for a way out, or try to make the situation bearable by setting up some semblance of civilization for sanity's sake. But the darkness can do terrible things for sanity. You can't help but cling on to visions of the past just so you can see something that isn't covered in shade. But when your choice is to succumb to a life of darkness, or remembering a life of, well, darkness, then I guess the shadows are inevitably going to take control. Eventually the group decided to split into two groups, more through a mutual disliking than a well thought out strategy, and Lotzie's rabble ventured into the cavernous dungeon looking for an escape. I didn't mind seeing them go. Some people were constantly looking to flee, and others fight. I would like to put myself in the latter category. Meanwhile, we set out trying to add a glimmer of light to this darkness, literally. After a few weeks, whilst looking out from the new encampment we called home, I could see Lotzie limping back towards us. We managed to set up a loose perimeter of battery lights, yet all they managed to accentuate was the devilish look in her eyes. She had a terrible gash on her leg. This had apparently happened during a climb, when she slipped and caught it on a loose bit of metal. We would later find out this was the final nail in the coffin that she called hope. As they slowly ambled closer, we could see that they weren't hoping to be welcomed with open arms. I came to the conclusion that the weapons in their hands would somewhat get in the way of a hug. In desperate panic, we shouted for everyone to flee before they arrived. We had spent time focusing on building a new sanctuary, not arming ourselves, and this devil did not welcome our new paradise. When we finally regrouped a little bit, what we now call south of the village, through exacerbated breath, Tex informed me that his sister Bex was missing. Through a hushed argument, I foolishly convinced the group, and more importantly, Bessie, to let me sneak back into the village to find her. I wish I hadn't. The glimmer of light was now tainted with what would appear to be shades, residing over the limp body of Bex, who lay defeated on the floor. The shades appeared to be dancing, toying with the body, not letting it leave this world to pass to whatever awaits us beyond. The reality was much bleaker. They were stripping her body of everything it had ever known. My last ever sight of the paradise we had built was Lotzie taking the heart of one of the gentlest souls. This is how the war began. I had always heard that war came at a price, and that price was often bodies, yet in this instance it was literally a body that started it. Lotzie and her crew had never given up on their plan to escape, and all expeditions come at a cost. Unfortunately for us, they were willing to pay the price, providing they could use our bodies to do it. If any of them sustained injuries, which became more common with desperation, they would simply send out a party to hunt down a friend for repairs. We tried to fight back at first. However, it became evident that fighting a vampire in the dark was a losing battle. We weren't willing to suck our enemies dry to keep our forces strong, so we adapted. We outsmarted them. It wasn't hard at first, but eventually stupid arguments lead to stupid mistakes. After the 392nd day of changing camp, a foolish remark about how my daughter should be pulling her weight, given her size, led to her storming off. In my defence, I stand at exactly 9 inches tall, and she's exactly 13. Our labels tell us that. Yet I get stuck carrying our makeshift tent, and after the 391st day, quite frankly, it gets a little tiring. I thought she simply needed some time to cool off, but 5 minutes later I felt frozen with fear. I dropped the tent and frantically scrambled after her. A minute or so into my search, I could tell it was too late. Signs of a desperate struggle and her broken pocket watch were a testament to that. I foolishly rushed towards the signs of danger, as you do when a loved one is threatened, ripping out a loose nail from a floorboard as a weapon on the way. As I approached town, I could see Lotzie towering above my daughter as she lay crumpled on the ground. Lotzie isn't particularly tall. She only comes up to my shoulders, but small toy syndrome rapidly accelerated the evil that grew inside of her. In a fair duel, I came to the conclusion I stood a chance. But fair is never a word that rang true with war, so striking first was definitely my best chance, and without his head, even the biggest of beasts would surely be slain. Taking one last minute to push down any fear and make my preparations, I walked with as much confidence as I could straight into the lion's den. I cleared my throat. "Lotzie, a word, my dear girl," I beckoned. I was always told the best way to win a crowd over was with a joke, but I guess jokes are subjective. "Well, you've certainly ruined my afternoon plans," she sighed, dropping the torture instruments which she had just caressed so lovingly. "I guess you can fill the void." She smiled menacingly. I guess you can fill the void. She smiled menacingly while stalking towards me with her pack lurching behind her. "I want all this fighting to stop," I barked. "You will be relieved of combat soon. Don't you worry, soldier," she chuckled. It was followed by a chorus of laughter from the handful of remaining lapdogs that had survived this long. I didn't see the humour myself. This war had taken a toll on all of us. Not a single one of them was without a scar or missing button, and she noted the gash on my forearm microseconds before lunging at the exposed weakness. I managed to parry, twisting slightly to throw her off balance as she pushed her weight through. She stumbled forwards, before falling and sliding almost gracefully along the ground behind me. Now was my chance. I turned quickly, ready to pounce on her. Bloodlust and rage had taken control of my body, but also my senses. An oversight. There always has to be a damn oversight. Why hadn't they built me with eyes in the back of my head? All I heard was the blade sing through the air before leaving its words hastily carved on my back. It's never a fair duel. The start of my attack mixed with the raw energy of violence propelled me helplessly towards Lotzie, who had regained a little composure. I lay stunned next to her, and before I knew it, she was on top of me. She had me pinned down. She took some form of pride in this victory. How shallow. She made calculated incisions to my chest. It was almost mesmerizing to watch. I forced a few words from my mouth. The others. And she took a much-needed break from her work. My words getting fainter as the life force fled my body until I was barely audible. Her curiosity always got the better of her, albeit a morbid one, and she leaned in to make sure she was the only one who knew my final words. That way, they could be lost to the world if she wanted them to be. The others wanted me to tell you. She stared blankly, trying to show as little care as possible. Then, reality sank in, followed by panic and finally a perplexed look as I used my last ounce of stuffing to deliver one final blow to the side of her head. She fell for it, the nail which I had carefully used not only to cut open my forearm, but had then concealed in there, shot violently through her temple as I ripped it to one side, making sure the damage was irreparable. I chuckled to myself. I guess this was the final nail in the coffin after all.
Whoa, that was epic, man.
That was so
Yeah,
cool.
it was really cool. Like, like Toy Story gone rogue.
Yeah.
There was there was a TV show, animated. I think it's based on a children's book, but it's about a teddy and a dolly who are lost and trying to find their way home. I'm pretty sure it's from the 80s, but it gave me that same vibe of like toys exist, but it's more like a gritty borrowers type world, and I really dig that, man. I really enjoyed the warfare element of it. Really cool.
Small Soldiers also comes to mind.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a mix. Like my original idea did sort of come from Toy Story when I first heard stuff. That I obviously thought of bears and stuff. So all the names in there, I don't know if you remember the names because they're quite nonchalant, but they're sort of loosely based off the Toy Story ones.
So you had Lotsie, who's Lotso. Was one of them Woodsy?
No, so you have Peep.
No. Oh yeah, like Bo Peep.
Yeah,
oh,
and then his wife is called... Man, I can't remember what I called her now because it made me laugh when I said it, and I'm not going to slate her name.
You're not going to sink to Ben.
Yeah, precisely. What is her name? No, Mandy's the girl that actually got abducted, hence why they got banished to the basement, which is also a bit morbid. I apologise.
It happens a lot on this podcast.
Yeah, I can imagine it's quite an easy route to go down to an extent. We had Rex and Bex, who was Tex and Bex, who I wanted to base off Rex. Man, why can I not find the wife's name in this whole block of text? Anyway, it's pointless. Basically, long story short, they're all named after characters loosely. But my original concept is I wanted to do more of like a Brothers Grimm take on sort of modern day stories, but not necessarily stories, more the animated stuff. Because it was more along the lines of, I feel like there's a sort of gap in the market, you know, as you get older and your tastes develop a little bit. And all these stories always wrap up so nicely. And it's been a while since there's been that sort of shock factor in terms of animation, I guess. You get the occasional humor one, like Sausage Party and stuff. And I guess Ted to an extent. But I more wanted like a continuation of the story and the stuff you don't see.
I can really see it as a visual piece of storytelling. They're like the nail being in the arm, and there's things you can do with characters that are stuffed like that. You know, the whole hiding the dagger cliche worked really well with him being a toy that could actually physically put something inside. And there were some really nice turns of a phrase for it as well, like you said, using his last ounce of stuffing.
Yeah, that was the cheapest phrase I put in there. I was debating.
No, that worked. I really like that as well.
Really sold it.
It's
so clearly we're cheap.
I think we are.
It's because I went for sort of more in-depth ones that may have been overlooked, but it's kind of... Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to do as much sort of...
I did also like Small Toy Syndrome.
Oh, Small Toy Syndrome wasn't one either.
Small Toy Syndrome, yeah. I just, before we move on too much, in terms of like the themes and stuff of it, I really like how they weren't actually, if I've got this wrong, then correct me, but they weren't really fighting for any reason. The fighting sort of started when they started getting injured because they were trying to get out.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's a tremendous analogy for humanity fighting over resources needlessly, isn't it?
Precisely, that's what I wanted. The war bit was quite in depth, and I wanted to use as many sort of, I guess, of your cliche analogies, like the price being bodies, and stuff like that. And I wanted to always tie it back to that theme, especially because, like I say, in my head, I had quite a fleshed out storyline for it, which I had to condense. And yeah, there's not much talk of the war, so I did there's quite a few time skips, and there wasn't too much sort of speaking in it. Originally I was going to have no speaking in it, but I felt like it would lose at least a little something if there was no talking in it at all.
It's nice to have a voice, I think, especially from doing this podcast. Like, it's always nice to put some voices in so that people can, because actually when I'm writing, and I said earlier for my story that as soon as I started writing the voice of the character, it became way easier because I knew who he was now.
Well, it's like any roleplay character, really. I know you don't do much of it, El, but you have done a little bit of tabletop stuff with me, and Ben. Obviously, you and I have done loads. As soon as you know, kind of how your character sounds, a little bit of what they think, it becomes really easy to play them. And I think it's the same thing with writing a character. If you can get into their voice and into their mindset, it all of a sudden you don't have to think, okay, what do I write here? You think, what do I say here? And it becomes, for me at least, it's easier to get those words out.
That's really true, actually. It's not what bit comes next in the conversation. It's what does this person say next? Because if you know them, then you know what they're going to reply with or not reply with, or what they're going to do. Then characters start taking actions, and then you're down a rabbit hole.
Oh my god! Right, L.
Yes, sir.
We now know that the next 10 years are going to be filled with you writing a series of successful toy-based novels.
They are. That is very true.
But you do some other writing. You are in a band.
I am, sir. Yes, I am in Dead Man's Whiskey. Through all of my flaws.
Would you like to tell us a bit about Dead Man's Whiskey?
Yeah, sure. I guess we have been going for a little while now. Probably about 3-4 years now. Obviously, the last year is sort of a little hiatus. But we're a rock band based in London. Similar themes to sort of Guns N' Roses, I guess, with Eddie Vedder on the vocals. Alter Bridge influences, a bit of Blackstone Cherry. And we're currently writing our second album, which is quite fun.
Exciting.
As mentioned, it's been a bit delayed, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
I think for clarity and not being too much of
no,
this is the band that I am also in.
I was wondering how far you were going to take that.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd take it a bit further because we kind of want to set the scene for the band, don't we? If people turn up,
I was going to start asking you questions about this Eddie Vedder singer that you've got.
Don't do that.
No, it's Dead Man's Whiskey is great. I've seen you guys a couple of times, listened to your songs a lot, and I really like them.
Thank you very much.
Really good stuff. And it's a real fucking shame about this lockdown situation. But I assume all bands are, or at least have been, basically 8 months. They've just taken it to the knee.
I think that's it.
A lot of us.
I think it's weird. There is a few bands, normally more sort of label associated bands, that obviously are a bit more active in terms of they have the funds there to do some more online presence stuff.
Sure, that makes sense.
And we are looking at a few ideas now. I have floated an idea past the band, which is also incidentally why I have this microphone. It wasn't, unfortunately, for you guys, just for this podcast.
Well, we appreciate it nonetheless.
Yeah, it's this maiden voyage, to quote a seafaring game that I'm no longer allowed to play.
And you're not salty at all. See that? See, we're building a Let's Call Field together.
I like it. It makes a difference in this band.
Let's not make waves.
Right, we've got some questions. We ask these to our guests with every episode, Elliot.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what your answers for them are. The first one is, what are you reading at the moment? What have you got sort of on your nightstand, whatever?
Currently, I am not reading anything. I do have some books on there, but they're mainly around sort of social science, I guess, sociology-based books.
You can talk about those.
I can talk about them, but I haven't started reading them yet. But I do have, I have had very thorough explanations of what's inside. They were lent to me from a friend that I used to work with, and jokes on him because then we don't work together anymore. And now I have these books, and they're just a whole load of sort of sociological experiments and people's sort of, I guess, behavior-driven stuff. And it goes more in depth, I guess, into more of a business analyst perspective, where there's ones obviously about general. I don't really know how to explain it. General.
Is it stuff like the chimp paradox?
Yeah, a little bit like the chimp paradox. I think the chimp paradox are actually maybe in one, if it's the paradox I'm thinking of, about money. Or is it?
Yeah, but you have your chimp brain.
No.
That wants to...
No, sorry. So there is one in there about a chimp, which is an experiment which they did. It's not the most PG experiment, but
gonna have to hear more about this non-PG experiment now.
Precisely.
So first of all, the guy fucks a chimp, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. No. Long story short, it was to see whether chimps could understand currency and if it had a social-driven behaviour. If currency was introduced, So some scientists did start to introduce a currency. They had tokens which could be exchanged for things like food. But not long into the experiment, they found out that the male chimps had started offering female chimps currency for sex, which would then be subsequently spent on food. So it's
the oldest profession.
Precisely. And it's weird that it would be one of the first uses that mankind would, well, not necessarily mankind, but any animal would go to.
Ugg got big rock. You want big rock? You take big cock.
I was trying to make this a bit more of a...
No,
I know. That's just why not?
No, the chimp paradox one is about you have two things in your brain, which are a computer that does all the thinky stuff, and then there's a chimp in there with the computer. And all it really wants to do is smash the computer up because it makes you, not eat the thing, fight the thing, fuck the thing. And it's about this war you're always having in your brain because the chimp wants to just get the thing, immediate satisfaction, but the computer knows that you require like certain rules and laws to function. And that's I'm not sure how much I can believe it because I think I've beaten my chimp into submission and now he just sits at the computer writing really crap code.
Oh God, that's horrible.
Okay, I'm moving it on. Elliot.
Yes, sir.
What's the best book you've ever read?
As mentioned previously, I've not read many books. I'm not good with words, and I don't write. And
you've just written something. We know you're good with words.
I have just written something, yeah. But like I say, it helped drastically that you guys dumbed down the speech in your stories to...
Yeah, but you didn't know that.
I know, I didn't know that till today. But I feel like you probably just had some sort of mutual pact. But I really like a saga. It's called the Evermen Saga. It's fantasy. I'm more into my fantasy stuff as an escape as opposed to sort of realistic stories to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because I either like fantasy or something that's actually real world relating personally. And it's just a massive sort of 4-piece saga. Your usual stuff, your magic, your warriors, all that, but it takes place over like 7 nations and how the whole it also has gods in it if I remember rightly, but this maybe it does. It just takes place and it just weaves a really good story, like similar I guess to Game of Thrones but without the controversial ending.
So is it lots of characters rather than following?
Yeah, so it will jump between different sort of storylines, different nations.
Yeah.
They are intertwined, obviously, and they do intertwine throughout the series. It starts off fairly sort of simple and explains the premise and about the ongoing wars and how it all started. But it just becomes really in depth, and the interactions between them, the alliances and stuff, just get really quite interesting. They're quite well written.
Oh, that sounds pretty good. What was it called? Sorry.
It's the Evermen Saga. It's by James Maxwell.
Maxwell. The Evermen Saga. Cool.
And that's all the books I've ever read, so good job.
That's going to answer
Well,
the next one.
that might make the next 2 questions
4.
quite interesting. Go for it, Nick.
We'll go the other end of the scale. What's the worst book you've ever read?
So that would be the Evermen Saga. I'm joking.
This doesn't have to be a book that you've completed. Like, have you ever picked up a book, read the first 10 words, and gone, nope? Because
I've listened to a lot of audiobooks, and there are some that I have switched off, but you sort of blank them out.
Did you switch them off because the story was bad, or because the actual
it's a bit of
bad?
both. It's the storytelling. It's one of those things that's going to be very controversial as well. I could never get into the Harry Potter books because the first ones put me off. And I don't like starting a series like 6 or 7 books in, where I think I may have just been the wrong age to pick them up, and thoroughly enjoy them as a child because I was never really into reading. But it was definitely a franchise I got into later. But the first book on that I put down pretty much 10 pages in. I didn't really give it a fighting chance.
I'm really enjoying this answer because the worst book you've read is The Philosopher's Stone, which is one of the best-selling books.
No, it is, but Is it best?
It's not for everyone.
No,
No,
I
I'm
mean-
not saying it should be. I think it's fantastic that you think it's not good.
It's just
On the
No.
on the audiobook thing as well.
Yeah.
It definitely can affect. I mean, I know I've spoken to probably both of you about this, but I was listening to. I'm gonna open up Audible on my phone so I can find out who it was. Actually, no, I won't call out.
Yeah,
the
probably
actor.
don't ruin somebody's career.
It's I mean, his career. This was years ago, but it's the first book in the Witcher series.
Oh yeah, I tried that.
And I mean, like if you've seen Henry Cavill's performance as Geralt, you've played the game. He has a real gruff voice. That's like all it is. That's all it takes to be Geralt. But the guy in the audiobook, he makes Geralt talk like that. So he's got a sort of a camp northern accent with a bit of a lisp, and I just could not get past it.
Yeah, it was the same for
it's
me.
just-
Like, there's a
Really?
series called Red Rising, and the first three I love to bits. They've all got the same voice actor. They're all written mainly from like one person's perspective, and then it was released as a trilogy. And then for some reason they decided there needed to be a fourth book, and the fourth book suddenly has it from like 6 different perspectives. It's got 4 different narrators. The
Crikey.
girl in it, no offense to her, but her voice is just not meant for audio. Like, my voice is not particularly meant for audio, but hers is somehow worse. And it's just...
What's her name? Maxine.
That's the one, yeah. Must just... Wasn't given a fighting chance in life.
I actually did listen to the Last Wish. I think it's called, the first Witcher book.
Yes.
I listened to that all the way through. I didn't mind that guy. I thought it was okay. He took a spin.
But I think, did you play the games
I did, yeah.
first or after?
Yeah. So I played the games first. So I played all of The Witcher 1, played the first like hour of The Witcher 2, decided I really didn't like it, and then played The Witcher 3 pretty much to death. Then saw the show, and I was like, well, that because the timeline is so messed up in the show. I was like, I need to make sense of this. So, but I didn't really fancy just sort of like reading something that was a translation. So I thought I'd listen to it instead. So I listened to that audiobook. And yeah, it worked for me. It's a bit lispy. It's a bit sort of northern like that. But I didn't mind.
I couldn't get into the show either. Nico and Bill from Dead Man's Whiskey have done a Witcher song, which I wasn't part of. But I've tried to watch the show after, and I just found it a bit confusing in terms of the storyline. Once again, it feels like it's a bit too choppy, and it doesn't quite flow as well as it could. I like the premise. Like I say, it seems to tick all the boxes for something I would like in a show. But I feel like it's sort of soap acting mixed with soap camera shots and pans. Like, it has some of the weirdest sort of cinematography that I just couldn't quite get into it.
Ooh. Yeah,
Endorsement for that.
I think if I wasn't already invested, I would have probably bounced off the first episode where it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know why. Like, it sort of becomes more apparent why they chose to do it that way later on. And there are some cracking episodes later on, I would say.
There's also some bad CGI.
There's some bad CGI.
I think that's it as well, yeah. It's just like, when you've had a lot of series of a similar ilk come out that have these big budgets, and it does kind of get a bit hard to go back to the smaller budget ones, even though it's probably not small budget by any means.
No, I get that. I get that totally. Just on the toss a coin to your Witcher song, that version that you and Bill did was really good, Nick. I really enjoyed it.
It was properly fun to record.
Seems it's
video
loosely
sounds
books related. We'll tweet that one out as well, I think.
Yeah, I got a handful of coins thrown in my face during the. We said, oh, we'll shoot it when we're doing it. We're not gonna shoot a full video. We said, oh, wouldn't it be fun to toss a coin? And then Aaron, who's the sound engineer we were working with, a lovely guy, said, oh, hang on. Went up to his bedroom and got what was essentially a small dustbin full of pennies. And was like, yeah, just yeet them at yourself. And so in the shot, I had some, people, and they didn't want to hurt me. And I was like, just fucking throw them. And I've got a big handful. I scooped them out. had them in front of me. I said, I'll just throw them directly up. And I closed my eyes because obviously I didn't want to take a coin in the eye. And if you watch the video, you see that the first one hits me and my entire body reacts with panic as like my brain goes, you just threw £2 worth of pennies into the air.
It does look like a really weird sort of L'Oreal hair advert. it's like the B-sides.
Would you like to watch a man dodge things he's just thrown up into the air?
It happens more often than not in this band.
It truly does.
Okay, so we've actually got another question for you here, which is, have you got a favourite literary character?
I don't know why, because he's not that well developed. I think he's just kind of relatable to me. I quite like Parsable from Ready Player One, and I don't know why. Yeah, I literally can't tell you why.
So I haven't seen the movie or read the book.
Do not see the movie.
Okay, right, okay, good first
Hands down, like if you do it, watch the movie first, and then the book will make no sense.
So I have I actually have a copy of Ready Player One ready to read, but it's about 10 down in my read list.
It's
so
definitely worth a read if you're a geek. Like, I'm quite geeky, and I like my games, and I like. Yeah, it's a massive throwback to games and a nod to sort of films of 70s, 80s sort of ilk. Okay. And I really enjoy it, and I enjoy the awkwardness and I guess the escapism that comes with games mentally, you know, and with most things, to be honest, where you can picture yourself as something different.
Yeah, totally. And
it's quite relatable in that way, and that there's some good twists in it. But the film is just on a whole nother level of they did what we said a bad book is, the way you read like the first 5 pages. I feel like they read the first 5 pages and then they thought they got the gist and made the rest up, and it's so far off. Yeah, it's so far off from the book.
So is this character that you've gone for, is this the main character of the story?
Yeah, so he's the main protagonist, and yeah, he's just kind of like your average guy, tanned, just trying to get through in a weird world and looking for an escape. I quite like it. I think it's just, you know, when you can see yourself in someone and you think, like, if this was the real world, because it's becoming sort of a reality to an extent where people are actually working on the software in that game currently. And it's like, you know, it's one of those things that could evidently become reality. It's got some quite deep undertones in it. In a very kind of weird and carefree book, and he fits that scene perfectly because it's probably how most people would be, and it does take a dig at sort of the modern world. So
interesting.
So this one's I really like this question. I think it's good fun, and we've had some strange answers already for this. If you could take any book and adapt it to a different medium, so it could be, you could want to write a song about it, you could want to turn it into a movie, a video game, a board game, whatever. So you could take any book, turn it into another medium, what would it be and why?
Maybe...
Don't say Harry Potter in
I wasn't.
1999, because
something to do with escapism, perhaps.
I was gonna say maybe something morbid, like the Crucible, but like a family board game. Do you know where you've all got to get together and just sort of like persecute innocent people, but it's based on a real world, sort of, somewhat loosely based on historical events.
You rolled 6, draw a card. Oh no, you're Proctor.
Precisely. Just something like quite macabre that would make me laugh if it ever sold well.
If it sold well. You just want to inflict pain on as many families as possible. Is that what we're getting?
Yeah, essentially. I just want accusations to be flying, but the consequences be a lot more real. Like, you could even feel free to put fuel and some logs in the actual board game itself. Yeah. Just make it dark.
How's Susie getting on at uni? Oh, no, she came home for the summer. Lost a game of Crucible. We had to burn her in the garden.
Yeah, it reminds me. It would be a lot like that Dungeons and Dragons film that I have yet to watch.
Which
the
one?
the massive the religious connotations one, the persecution of D&D and the uni.
God, Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah, I haven't watched that yet. Have you watched it?
So, yes.
Is
For anyone who doesn't know, listening, there's a guy called Jack Chick who writes. He does these little comics called Chick Tracks, and they're all these super evangelical Christian comics. And he did one called Darkest Dungeons, talking about the links between D&D and Satanism.
Ah.
And like at the end of it, legit calls out. It says you should burn these heretical books, including specifically stating the works of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien as work that should be destroyed. But then someone got the rights to it, and they made a real, like, shot-for-shot movie of this Chick Track.
it just
And it is wild.
yeah, it looks good. It's actually got good effects at the time as well.
Yeah. I'd really recommend JonTron did a review of it. I'd give his review a
That's
check out.
how I
It's
saw
much
it,
easier
because
to
you showed
find
me that. That is exactly
I
how.
did.
Yeah, but I also came up recently in something I was watching. It was called Game Over, which is a series on Netflix which goes through the history of sort of video games and how they developed, and it's also raised in that as well.
Oh, wow.
So we've gone through some books, some games, but do any of them like really dig down into your emotions of it? Has anything that you've ever read ever made you cry? And if so, when was the last time?
Anything ever made me cry?
You know, have you connected with a character in particular, and they've died, or anything like that?
Was it any of your programming books at
Oh
university?
yeah, no, that was it.
That
Yeah,
is?
when they dropped Objective C, it was a bit weird. I had to start using Swift.
Speak English, damn it.
Yeah, sorry, coder talk. There's a few geeks that will get that. You'll be fine. What was I literally just thinking? There is a very morbid scene in Red Rising in the first book that is quite sad, but it sets up the whole storyline. That was quite emotional because it was unexpected, and it's the way they use that recurring theme throughout, and they warp the idea essentially, and it modifies throughout the sort of set of books. And it shows how there's two sides to every event, and how people can use that and abuse that in terms of gaining power and control over sort of the population. The Red Rising books are definitely good, and that scene is it's quite
interesting
an emotional
to have cried so early on in the book as well. That's
no, I wouldn't say I cried. I don't really cry. I like to bottle everything up and then write really emo lyrics that no one will ever read.
Oh, you wait till album 2.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I just can't. I can't fit anything to this. Do you have some lyrics for me?
I can't say anything has made me like genuinely cry. Not book wise. I don't think I have a vivid enough imagination.
Do you get it with films, or I mean, even
I
music?
get it with films. Some music. I think in terms of music, you've probably made me cry more than anyone. But that's because you're always crying on stage, and it makes me tear up.
I think we have to explain this.
Yeah, we have a song called War Machine, and Nico just really likes robots.
We really like robots. No, we have a song called "Make You Proud," which is about some of you listening will know, but it's about my mum's struggle with brain cancer, and my struggle with my mum's struggle with brain cancer. And I tell the story on stage. And the thing about performing is you feed off of the emotion of your crowd. And there have been times when we've had really quite big or really quite emotive crowds, and it's honestly overwhelming. And then I cry, and then I look to Elliott for support because he is my friend and I love him dearly. And then he cries, and then we just cry on stage. And it's always awkward because it happens. There's a bit before the guitar solo where I really give it some welly, and it's quite dark and it's very emotional, that part, and that sets me off. And then I'm really upset and I'm crying a bit, and I think, oh bollocks, I've got to start singing again in 4 bars, and I can't breathe without going. So I have to re-educate myself on how to breathe before. There are a lot of live recordings of the song where the last chorus after that solo is shaky as fuck.
That is true.
But yeah, I think that's especially because we have a connection to the song, Al. I agree that one.
I think that's why, and I think
can
it's
be a hard
you as
hit.
well, because you have such a raw connection to it, and we've obviously known each other for quite a while now. It's just a bit overwhelming. Yeah, like I say, not really much books. Like I said, I don't think I have the imagination for it. Like, there's been games, which is weird, because...
No, I've credit games for sure.
Yeah, like Heavenly Sword was one. I don't know if you played that on PS3.
I didn't play it, no.
If you play that, there is scenes. There is a scene. I wouldn't even say scenes. The actual game is just like a linear storyline game. It's basically a hack and slash. It's quite boring. But there is one scene in it that's good. The storytelling is great in that.
I think I'm going to bring us into our last question here, and it's a controversial question, not because of what people say, but because of how we say it. Can we have one really uninteresting /
disinteresting
disinteresting fact about you, El?
An uninteresting fact. It's kind of hard when you're me, and your life is just it's built to be a movie.
Just so fucking interesting, man.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's just, when you just most of the time you find yourself dulling your life down so others don't feel as bad. And meanwhile, you're sitting in Miami.
I shit art.
One uninteresting fact about me. It's such an uninteresting fact.
Perfect.
It's not, though. It's kind of interesting at the same time.
No,
Okay,
say
it, man.
It's not really... I've been in detention once. Oh, no, there's 2. Okay, I've been in detention once when I was growing up because Erin, who is now one of our sound engineers when we do demos, I just happened to be standing next to him, but long story short, his Tipex pen leaked in school, and instead of like a normal person just going and washing their hands, he decided to run out of the classroom mid-lesson and launch this Tipex pen, which hit the one teacher in the school that it shouldn't have hit, and we got sent to detention for sort of a racial-based attack, which was not meant to happen. It was literally Erin being Erin, and if you've ever met Erin, he's just so hyperactive. He's a lovely guy.
Yeah.
And it was just, it's really an uninteresting fact, but it was, one of those times where it was wrong place, wrong time.
There's something that is really interesting about it. Erin's pen leaked, and Erin fled.
No, he didn't flee the scene.
The pen.
He
ran
out of the
room.
classroom,
Yeah.
literally just to lob his pen
Fled
as far as he
fled
could.
the scene to launch, hits teacher, and you end up in detention.
Yeah, because I was sitting next to him.
What the?
I think I may have had some Tipex on me because it leaked. I did.
Were you? Were you accused of attempting to white aforementioned teacher?
It was more of a I think it was. It had all the elements that weren't meant to be there, didn't it? Just like it's a series of unfortunate events.
To be frank though, Erin is not white.
No, he's not. He's Turkish. So it was just a weird one. I think they were just looking for a reason. I mean, I think it was more that he ran out the room and lobbed his...
So it looked like a targeted attack.
Yes, it looked like a spontaneous burst out. I know. I tell a lie. I've been in detention twice, and the other time was just as stupid. Because that also wasn't my fault, which is quite a running theme.
Oof.
Yeah.
I like that disinteresting, uninteresting fact.
I mean, it's a fact that's not going to gain anyone any sort of merriment in life. So it's just...
that's perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, that somewhere that teacher's at home going,
I'm famous.
I did this.
Oh wow.
If you are, what was that teacher's name? Let's do
Oh,
it
I
before
genuinely
this person
don't know
out.
his
What was
name.
that teacher's name?
I
Elliot?
genuinely don't know his name.
Oi, Mr. Teacher.
Yeah, leave those kids alone.
Leave
Yeah, leave those kids alone.
You're not helping my defence.
Well, all in all, it's just another brick in the wall. Yeah. You've been a lovely guest, Elliot.
I can hear the
Lovely.
hesitation in your voice. So you are
So,
welcome.
thanks for coming on, man.
No worries.
You've been genuinely awesome.
Cheers for having me.
So if people want to talk to you on social media or see any of your stuff, where can they find
If
you?
they would like to talk to me on social media, I would strongly suggest not. I have like loads of friend requests that I just don't accept. So if I don't know you, just come and see me at a show, and I'll be more than happy to talk to any single one of you. But if you want to find stuff about the band, you can go to facebook.com/deadmanswhiskey or YouTube with the same and Spotify with the same.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. Please don't come again.
Yes, sir. I think that is a given.
Thank you, Ben. I don't know what for. Thanks.
Random thanks now.
He wrote the intro.
Thank you.
To be fair.
Thank me for being here.
Good. Let's just watch Nick
guy.
thank himself vigorously for 5 minutes.
What a man. What a mighty good man. And there are 3 more thank yous that go to Scott, Sexy Boy Burn, Gary, a hunky man led, and Matt, more than you can handle, McLaren.
My, what an adventure. You'll have to come back another time. Our adventurers are off now in search of more stories. If you'd like to meet our adventuring party, you can reach them by Raven at Bookcase Tiny. Or, alternatively, you can help them on Patreon to fund their adventures. Those tavern ales don't pay for themselves, I'm afraid. But thank you for joining us. Now get out of my wizard tower. I have wizardy things to do. Bloody do-good as always coming round here wanting something